Hill City. Welcome to our online conversation. We have been having these on the house church weeks so that we can discuss in a little more depth the sermon topic. And the last couple months, actually, we've been in a series on the Sabbath practice. And if you're not familiar, definitely go back, listen to those sermons. But we're just talking about how you could implement Sabbath rest into your weekly rhythm and why that is such an important spiritual discipline. In these Zoom conversations, we've just been talking with people in the church who can share a little bit more about how they practice Sabbath and maybe just give you some on-the-ground experience from that practice. And I'm so lucky to have Mark and Julie with us, and they're going to share a little bit. And first off, Mark and Julie, I've been asking everyone this question. What was your familiarity with the Sabbath, either when you were growing up or when you first became a Christian?
You want to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. For me, growing up with the Sabbath was probably just a word I heard in the Bible, not making a whole lot of sense of it. And I'd say even until recently, but I would say in the last maybe 6 months or so, maybe a little bit longer, I feel like I've heard, based on what I've learned now, a lot of these things from John, just silence and solitude and a lot of these different kind of maybe buzzwords. And I was like, that's so interesting. What is this guy doing? Not knowing kind of that these were the practices of the Sabbath. So for me, up until recently, no real prior knowledge except for it showing up in the Old Testament and New Testament. So not a whole lot.
And I think for me growing up, I did grow up going to church on a Sunday. But usually kind of what came with that is then when we got home, then we had to catch up on all of our chores and homework. And so it never really felt like a day of rest. It just kind of felt like a day of postponing all of the things we needed to do until after we got home from church. And even up until probably COVID, I think being a volunteer in a church, we just kind of felt like Sabbath was maybe for all those other lucky people who got to attend the service, but volunteering, we did children's ministry for a long time, and we did, we taught a class, and when you're doing all that work, Sunday just kind of felt like an extension of the work week. It never really felt restful. If anything, there was just as much stress on a Sunday as there was really Monday through Friday, plus Saturday was usually spent preparing for Sunday. So I just kind of felt like maybe on some level we were excluded from the Sabbath because we had all this good church work to do, but I didn't realize the emotional and spiritual toll and physical toll that it was taking on us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's something we haven't talked about in these conversations either, just how often ministry work can take over any sort of Sabbath practice. So that is a interesting thing to bring in, because it does seem, even if you have some familiarity with it, then you have the extra hurdle of, but aren't I supposed to do all the churchy stuff of volunteering for this and that, and doing my part and everything else. And sometimes that can really wreak havoc on any sort of day of rest. So now that you guys have some familiarity with Sabbath and practice it, what would you say your normal Sabbath practice looks like? Or if you want to share maybe how that Sabbath practice has evolved as you guys have practiced it.
For me, I think that it is kind of become really on Sunday just a day of rest. Even if we have our house church we're doing ours on Sunday morning, but afterwards, there's a lot of slowing down, a lot of not taking care of those busy things that can overrun our time, like errands and taking your kids shopping or whatever it may be. Just really kind of setting some firm boundaries and making sure, at least for me, I'm spending time in the Word, trying to do that silence and solitude, even if it's just for a short period of time, and just some of those different practices. And I can tell a huge difference in just how much more relaxed I am going into Monday. Before, if I might bring work home, I always would put those things off until Sunday. I hated giving up Saturday and Sunday. So now, if I need to get it done, I'm doing it on a Saturday, but really just trying to leave Saturday, I guess, alone, if you will. And it's been really good. So I've enjoyed it a lot.
That's great. Anything to add, Julie, on what your Sabbath practice has looked like, or anything different?
Yeah, I definitely just think it's a work in progress. I think it can just, some Sundays have felt like a real win for us, and then other Sundays have been a total disaster.
Yeah.
And I think what I would just say is just to keep practicing it, and that it's not something that we have completely figured out. We're still tweaking it. We kind of take an inventory at the end of the day of what worked and what did not work.
Yeah.
There's usually more things that did not work than worked, but that's okay. It's just like, okay, well, we tried, and then we'll just make a change for next week. And so it's just kind of like realizing that learning a new practice just takes a lot of time, and that it's not a race. It's it might take us 20 years to really get into a great routine with Sabbath, but we're just taking it 1 week at a time. I was telling Mark, I think the hard part for me right now is that I don't have like a problem stopping doing things. I have a hard time turning off my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because I might even be trying to take a nap, but I'm running a grocery list in my head, or I'm thinking about the things that I need to take care of the next day. So I'm still kind of working on just trying to actually give my mind a break and not be thinking so much. But that's a habit that's hard to break. So just one day at a time.
Yeah, no, that is great to share. I would definitely say, there's been some Sabbaths where it's felt like, oh, okay, like this is what it's supposed to be like. And then other times where it's just been, wow, that was miserable. And I don't think I did anything I was supposed to do, or at least it didn't feel like it. So I think it's encouraging too for people to know that's the reality. You have to keep practicing it to actually see those days that feel like wins.
Yeah.
So on that note, would you guys say that there are maybe some discouraging things or some barriers you've come up against, and then maybe some of those wins or the good things you've gotten out of the Sabbath practice?
Yeah, I would say some of the barriers are just like not trying to be too legalistic with it. But still trying to, for us too, trying to like show our kids like what this looks like, because for them it's, I don't know if torture is the right word, but it's hard for them, and they don't understand it. Here we are being Christians for a long time and just learning some of what this is and why it's good for us. I also know for myself, like trying to like stay off of like, or not being on social media, or like not watching football or whatever it may be. For me, a lot of those things almost feel like an addiction withdrawal. Like it's really hard. But I think for me, that shows me like how much clout maybe that had in my life, and just trying to, again, not be legalistic, but realizing that I really do need to set some better boundaries. Like if I'm really going to understand like what it means to rest. But that's been really hard, because like Julie, like I like to, I don't know, shop online or whatever it may be, or look at research stuff or whatever, and just to kind of let that stuff go is really challenging.
Yeah, it is.
I think what I kind of see as like a win is if I can just take a walk by myself, or I think really a lot of it is trying to find those little pockets of solitude. It's not just like removing things from your life. It's also like filling those things with seeking like intentionally the Holy Spirit and Jesus's presence. And so I think when I have a day where the day was slow and the day felt intentional, then I feel like that's a real win. I think days that are harder are when our kids have a lot of activities and we're still trying to figure out what to say yes to and what to say no to, because the Sabbath does involve celebration, and we don't want to say like no birthday parties, no sleep, like no nothing, but then those
you will not celebrate.
But when you have 4 kids with 4 ideas of what they want to do to celebrate that day, and all of them require driving them to those things, it's just trying to figure out where we draw lines. And so it's still a struggle.
I think some of the wins that we've had are like, there have been at least once where we have our kids go do their kind of intentional quiet time, and we try and build it in 5-minute increments or whatever, but you come down, it's like perfectly quiet, and they're content doing whatever it is that they're doing, either reading their Bible or whatever. But there have been a couple good wins in that area too. So, but I think the key is what Julie said, like doing it in these small pieces and not trying to, bite off more than you can chew and just think that you're going to arrive at some perfect Sabbath. So
right. Keeping it doable is really important. That's such an interesting note too, because you're not only, it's hard enough to create a practice or a rhythm of life for yourself and keep to it and actually be formed in that practice, but then to add to that children who you want also to be formed into that practice, but you're in the midst of it yourself. I think this is the first conversation we've been able to have with people who have kids. So what would you say, are some of the you've mentioned some of the challenges in that already, but is there anything else you want to say about how you practice Sabbath with kids? Maybe some more of the challenges, or some things that you've had to settle on as pointers for yourself as you go through that process?
I think, we haven't figured out how to do this perfectly. We're just kind of trial and error with our kids, and maybe one day we'll look back at this conversation and laugh about how we thought we were doing good. But I think we've been trying to just start slow because we don't want our kids to have a resentment towards the Sabbath or see it as this thing our parents forced us to do that kept us from doing things we wanted to
enjoying
do.
life.
So we're trying to keep that in mind and trying to really emphasize like this is a gift, and it's a gift you get to open. It's for you. It's a treat for yourself. And we started with the first week, I think we just asked them to spend 30 minutes by themselves in some kind of a silence, or they could listen to worship music, and
or read the Bible.
If they wanted to read their Bible, just something quiet for 30 minutes that was focused on the Lord. And then we've just been trying to add 5 minutes a week. I think they're up to like 45 minutes or something like that. And so we're not asking them to do 8 hours of silence and solitude. We're asking them to do just little chunks, and they don't seem to be, so far we haven't been met with a lot of resistance on that. If anything, I think they actually, somewhere deep down, I think they know they need that. Even though they probably would never say that out loud, I think they do need that quiet time, because being raised in a pack, there's just always so much noise and a lot of activity, that I think that they don't seem to mind taking some time to be quiet. We also have found like trying to implement family time has been a challenge. We do a lot of things together as a family time, but sometimes it's not very intentional. So when we first started our first Sabbath, we said we were going to take a family walk, and they completely rebelled. Like
it was like a mile.
Yeah, it was
like terrible. We're going home.
I mean, they all came up with excuses. They were upset. There was pouting. And then we just refused to like give into that. And we just kept going. And then eventually they just realized like, this is happening. The sooner we like do it, the sooner it will end. And it's just, I think the important thing is just to know it doesn't have to be perfect. And it doesn't mean you just say, well, we're never going to try it again. So the next week, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, because it started rough, but it did end well.
Yeah.
So that was a good win.
I think just you have to like push through the resistance.
Yeah.
And as parents, I think, you know, a lot of times it's hard to deal with that because then you start second guessing, you know, well, am I doing the right thing? Like, am I forcing this? But I don't know. We've seen that, like, if you just keep going, keep trying. And now, you know, this last Sabbath, they just wanted to play games and it was a quieter day. And they seem to be okay with that. Again, it's not perfect, but we're just trying to take it one week at a time.
Yeah. The other thing we did is in the very beginning, we sat down, had a conversation with them. We showed them that same video that we all watched. And when it talked about all the different practices and just tried to show them that, like, it's not this, again, kind of not this legalistic thing, but there are things that you do during the Sabbath that like are enjoyable. Like, it's not just all silence and solitude and no electronics and no friends. It's not just this big list of no.
Yes.
There's things that you can say yes to. And just having a good conversation with them, trying to get them to understand, and I don't know, just have a conversation about what it is and why we're doing it. And so that's kind of how we started it. And there's been some good things. I think the biggest rebellion is the lack of electronics.
Yeah, I bet.
Screen time. So, which I think most adults kind of relate to as well. So, I think that's been the biggest pushback. But overall, I think it's been going relatively well. I think that they, like Julie said, have kind of come to a place where there is a part of them that enjoys it, even if they don't verbally say it. So
yeah, that's an interesting thought. Even you know, having kids make their own list of, you know, once they're maybe taught a little bit about what Sabbath is, you know, have them make a list of what they think would be enjoyable things for Sabbath. That was one question that kept coming up though when I've talked with parents is, you know, we did it and this kid wants to do this and this kid would like to do this, and so we have all these activities and it's not Sabbath anymore because now we have to do all these activities. So it's nice to think about, how can you just have a quieter day, even if there's several kids with several different agendas or things they want to do. But have you noticed has there been any, I don't know, individual uniqueness about what your different kids like to do or want to do on the Sabbath? Or do you think they're pretty content with the like quiet and
I think they're pretty content, but I do find that I guess maybe the majority of them, because we kind of have it like in a time frame of like throughout the day, and they always try and push it to the very end. They try and procrastinate. They want to do all the fun stuff and whatever, but the quiet time and stuff, they're always trying to push back on when that occurs.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know. I haven't noticed any individual.
I think most of them just want to read and they're not necessarily even all readers by nature, but
no.
But it's a nice Sabbath practice.
Yeah. Although I do notice the two younger boys always like try and call dibs for the Alexa to take to the room to listen to worship music.
They're like, if nothing else, we can listen to worship music. Yeah. Well, I just think it's so cool that you guys were able to share with me in this conversation, because like I said, I even said this before we started recording, that, you know, in the house church I'm a part of, we've talked a lot about how do you do this with kids, and obviously maybe young kids are going to be very different from older kids. You know, teenagers who can drive are going to be very different from, you know, the kids in between. So there's a lot of flexibility there, but I think just key takeaways from what you guys said is, you know, try not to enforce legalism and also just keep it simple and doable and something you guys can have explained in a conversation together so that they know why you're doing it, and it's just not a bunch of new rules for that particular day. So I think that's really helpful for people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for sharing. I'm just gonna pray to close us out. Dear Lord, thank you so much for the families in our church and for the Mitchells. We just pray that everyone who's kind of stepping into this Sabbath practice would meet you there, that they would be blessed in their practice, that they'd be blessed in the attempts they're making, that their children would be blessed in those attempts, and that they would even be able to sense your presence with them in a very special way this upcoming Sabbath, and that they would know how much you love them and want to be near to them and involved in their lives. We know that there's so many kids at Hill City, and we just pray that nothing we do, including the Sabbath practice, would be lost on them, but that we would be able to say that we're intentional in discipling the youngest in our congregation. And we just pray, Lord, that you would bless the people listening, that everyone would be encouraged to try some form of Sabbath and some form of rest, and that you just meet them in that obedience, that as they step out in faith, you would meet them there with your presence and your perfect love and your perfect peace. And we just thank you for all you've done in our community and will continue to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.